Duncan, thank you for that. And yes, indeed, that was a rather long introduction. The shorter version thereof is the following. I'm a fellow photographologist. And I'm pausing because I'm just checking whether people are looking that up on ChatGPT. Is that an existing word? A fellow photographologist. And I say this shamelessly. I am obsessed with historical South African photographs. So wherever I go, I'm always searching for photographs, original photographs. So I prefer to deal with original photographs from more than 100 years ago. And it's really an absolute obsession. Recently, a dealer saw the way that I was handling photographs. And this is a rather sexist comment, but it's not my comment, but I thought it was funny at the time. He said to me, my wife wishes that I treat her the way that you treat the photographs. So that just shares the obsession over there. The reason why I'm standing in front of you today is I've started a series in terms of Transvaal towns where I purely rely on postcards only. So I'm not going to cheat by using any other photograph but a postcard. Middelburg, which I'm presenting here today, happens to have been the third article that I've published. The first two, firstly Heidelberg, Standerton, this was the third one. The fourth one in line is Volksrust. And I don't know where Felipe is, but there's Felipe. Volksrust, I've not found a single photograph of any church in Volksrust. And I was pleased to hear you say earlier on that there was a church building that preceded the current NG Kerk over there. So I'm holding back a little bit with the hope that I'll find a postcard. I can go and cheat and find any other photograph potentially, hopefully, but I prefer to rely on the postcard. A minute or two before I walked up over here, somebody asked me the question, so what is a deltiologist? So I've introduced myself now as a fellow photographologist. Now I'm a deltiologist as well. Deltiologist is just a fancy word for somebody who collects postcards, picture postcards. Deltiologists collect and then they research. And what you're going to see over here today is my attempt at researching Middelburg. Now, I have to make a disclaimer right up front. I'm a photo historian. I'm not a Middelburg historian. As I stand in front of you, I feel a little bit intimidated because there are many Middelburg historians over here, and they will probably be able to guide me and correct me as I go along. Granted, when I do research, relying on these picture postcards, I do have to go and do research. I do have to expand on history, and that's what I'll be doing today a little bit. The presentation is twofold. Firstly, I'm going to talk to you about, very briefly, and I've taken out quite a bit of information in terms of the history of photography in South Africa, but briefly talk to you about photography. Then we're going to go into picture postcards. Let me pause over there. So what am I busy with? I'm presenting to you photographic images in postcard format. Often people ask me, so as a deltiologist, don't you consider any other photographs? The answer is, oh heck yes, I have to consider all photographs. Picture postcards probably makes up only about 10%, if not less, in terms of the entire Hardijzer photographic research collection. And I will keep on expanding on that collection because all these images that I'm about to share with you are 110 years old or older. They are all, and some people struggle with this concept, they are all artifacts in their own right. An artifact is an item that we can rely on to conduct our research. Without any further ado, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Picture postcards have got their origin in the photograph. Photography originated from the camera obscura. Recently, I visited a chap in Cape Town, and he gave me a Coke can that he's just sealed, and he told me on the inside he's loaded a film. He says to me, when I get to my studio, just take off the little seal over there and check what happens in a year's time. And that's a little camera obscura that is built out of a Coke can, so it's very simple. There's a little definition in terms of where the word photography originates from. It's a Greek word made up of two words, namely light and to draw. The word photography was first used by Herschel. And a little bit more about Herschel later, because Herschel has got a very important footprint in South Africa as well. If you attended the presentation last year in Clarence, I shared this with you as well. For those of you who follow photography, you would have seen this image over and over again. But let's just pause over here. The first recorded image by a Frenchman called Niepce, N-I-E-P-C-E. Can anybody make out what this image is about? This image, whilst you're trying to figure it out, had an exposure time, it's been suggested, of between, are you ready for this? 7 to 8 hours. So that was his first attempt to play around with chemicals, etc. A few years ago, somebody tried to clean this up a little bit, and that's what the picture looks like after it's been cleaned up. Does it give you a better perspective? What Niepce did, he was standing in a room, had his camera or device, whatever you want to call it at that stage, and he pointed it to the outside of the courtyard of wherever he was staying, and that's the courtyard. So there you can see the roof in front of you, and there's another roof structure on the top left over there, and another roof structure over there. And that's, of course, a wall of a building of some sorts. So the very first image that was taken, but the challenge was we couldn't get a permanent image. So although he had the image, how do we make it commercially available? Commercial photography or commercial photograph only became available 1839. So that was a number of years after this photograph was taken. South African history, very important. You remember that I referred to John Herschel. Sir John Herschel, together with Charles Smythe and Sir David Gill, they were all attached to the Cape Town Royal Observatory. And the interesting thing is the very first photographs, they weren't professional photographers. They were simply playing around with a concept. And that's where John Herschel came up with the name photograph or photography per se. Some of the photographs that they've taken over there are duly curated within the Edinburgh University, their museum over there. One day when I'm back in Edinburgh again, I need to go and have a look at these images that survives. The first photographs that we know of that have been taken on South African soil. The first photographer, it says over there, but let's call it the first professional photographer active in South Africa, was a Frenchman by the name of Leger. L-E-G-E-R, Leger, and Leger arrived from Madagascar of all places. And we would all think that photography started in Cape Town. It didn't. It started in Port Elizabeth, where he went into a partnership, and he took what we refer to as daguerreotype and ambrotype format photographs. The first paper format photograph that was ever produced was referred to as a carte de visite, and it's exactly what it is, a little format photograph in a visiting card format that people could have produced in batches of 1, 5, 10, 12, whatever. It depends on how deep my pocket was. The first camera was donated by a royal to Frederick York, but according to our research, Frederick York never used it because he sold up shortly thereafter, and that camera was taken over by a chap by the name of Arthur Green. Now, Arthur Green's work turns up fairly often still that I see around when I go and scratch for photographic material, because he was a prolific photographer. The first South African war photographed was a Zulu war. I'm not going to spend too much time over here, but this is an important slide as well, the different photographic formats. The first photographic format is referred to as the daguerreotype, so named after De Geer, who invented the first permanent photograph, followed by an ambrotype Carte de visite, cabinet cards, and stereo cards in South Africa are very popular for two reasons. Firstly, the Anglo-Boer War. There's a whole series of them that have been published. I've done research on the various publishers as well as deep-level mining photography. Now, that's mind-boggling. These Reed brothers went into the mines and went and took photographs in the mines. It was not an easy task. With all the heavy camera equipment, and they had to get the light right, etc. It was a major, major challenge. Of course, the reason why we're here today is the real picture postcard. It's also photographic format. Black and white snapshots. I was just talking to Theo earlier on our frustration in terms of people telling us that they've thrown away the family album. They've thrown away their heritage. They keep on throwing away stuff. Even photographs from, now I need to be careful, from our parents are historical artifacts, are important documentation to retain. In the discussion that I had with Theo, it's also been commented, but many of these photographs don't have any detail on them. We'll be surprised. We may not know who the sitter is, but whatever's being portrayed on the photograph may be very important. For example, a motorcycle. For example, an old-fashioned bicycle. For example, a type of hat that was worn by people going to church. And I'll stop there. There's so many examples. And often I publish on those themes as well. The last one is group photographs. As I arrived over here this morning, I saw all the, what do you call them, the committee photographs up on the wall at the back over there. And people don't look at those. They don't consider those as valuable artifacts. People throw away military photographs that were taken. For example, I did my military training in 1979. Is it important to keep those images? Maybe it's too recent, but if we start looking at 1950s, 1940s, Second World War, First World War, those group images are vitally important. So I guess I'm trying to gently persuade you or create an impression that every photograph has got some value. I'll share with you very briefly, I'm actively buying photographs all over the place. And recently I bought a batch of, I think, 300 photographs. I could only use 180 of those. The other 120 I didn't have a use for. Those are what I refer to as my rubbishes. My rubbishes sold the very next day that I had it loaded on the internet to a fellow researcher, to a fellow collector. So I don't see any value in it, but somebody else will see value in it. Enough of that. Deltiology defined. I'm not going to spend much time on that. But photography, as I've said, plays a pivotal role in terms of collecting or accumulating picture postcards. The first postcard was published around 1860s, but not in a photographic format. It just had a blank space that people could post and write a message on the other side of a postcard. Photographic postcards only really followed very, very late in the 1890s. Anglo-Boer War cards, very popular collector items, many comical cards, but also photographic cards. Not all that common, but when we find them, of most interest. As I've explained, all the cards that you'll see from here onwards are more than 120 years old. There's my first picture of Middelburg. So I'm going to take you on a visual journey. I'm talking about visual journey. What I've learned over the years as a photographologist or a person who's obsessed with photography, not everybody shares my passion. And as a psychologist, I also got to accept that it's got to do with visual orientation. Some of us in this room, I got to accept, although initially I felt a little bit offended by that. Some of us in this room are just simply not visually orientated. In other words, we can't sit and look at this image and see what there is to see. And sometimes with photographs, we just need to calm down and see to see what we can see. I know it sounds very philosophical, but I have to tell myself that on a regular basis. It's happened to me that I show an image to my wife and she points something out that I've never even seen on the photograph. And it just shows me how we hone our sight, how we hone what we want to see or what we are unintentionally missing on a photograph. Philippe's photographs today, classical example in terms of how important photographs are. Granted, they're more contemporary, but as Philippe introduced as well, they will become of significant importance. They are, for all intents and purposes, artifacts in their own right. What we've got over here is, and now I need to look at my notes on the laptop over here, that's the Lavis building. And the Lavis building in Church Street, and now I'm sharing a little bit of history with you, was called after Lavis's place of birth, Southampton. Interesting thing, Joseph Henry Lavis, born 1863 and passed away in 1938. He was also the mayor of town between 1907 and 1908. So he was a businessman, there's his business, but he was also a mayor. His son, however, beat him to that. Harry Lavis, an accountant, was also the mayor in Middelburg on at least, I say at least, on 10 instances between the period 1925 and 1952. So here we go. Through the picture postcard, we've lifted out some historical relevance. And by the way, if I may just go back, we talk about seeing. In front over here, we see the horse. And on that cart over there, it says H. Laver and Company Grocer's Store. So it's just interesting to see how they transported things in the first place, and secondly, how they also applied advertising for those individuals who are interested in advertising. The clubhouse, also in Church Street. Now, the clubhouse just stood about, I think, 2 or 3 buildings up from the Lavis building. And interesting over here, the clubhouse doesn't exist anymore. Look at the horse standing, and it's called a hitch rack. My wife, who's English speaking, says she's never heard of a hitch rack before. But the clubhouse welcomed people with horses. There we can see the Lavis house again. And the first building on the left over here is a carriage builder, and the second building over there is a bottle store. And now, of course, the challenge is to figure out what building is it there, what building is it there, etc. And that's the fun part in terms of analyzing these things. A fellow collector by the name of Rex Hilligan used to be the ex-mayor in town over here. Exactly which year, I don't know. And Rex Hilligan himself is also collecting picture postcards of Middelburg. And what he is in the process of doing, he's got a map that he got from Theo, and he's stipulating exactly where all these buildings are on the map. And that's the wise thing to do. I'm not there yet. Railway station. This building was completed in 1895 and stands, and I believe that we'll be visiting it later today, some 1 kilometer outside of town. Doesn't look like it when we drive there today, but back then it was 1 kilometer outside of town. The architect was I think it was von Lisa. And then just very interesting, you won't be able to see it, but that's a fun part. If I then have a magnifying glass, there's a lantern there, there's a lantern there, and on one of these lanterns, there's a ladder. And every night, the lantern had to be lit, and of course, it was paraffin-driven, whatever the case may be. So it also just shows us how the guys made use of light at the station. This postcard I saw at the back over there, but it's an important... Sorry, I keep on paging over here instead of here. This is an important image as well. It's a fairly common image. We see that regularly. But the reason why this is an important image is because that building burnt down in 1907. So stands in Market Street, Oliver Tambo Street today. And for what it's worth, the card was published by a prolific publisher Salo Epstein, that was Durban-based. There's the revised building, the new building that was opened in 1909. It's called the Government Building. It consists of the courthouse and post office. As I said, completed in 1909. It's a SAPSCO card. SAPSCO is also an important concept, stands for South African Photographic Stereo Company. Today, this, and many of you may know this, if not, today it also acts as a regional high court. Now, Felipe has presented an image on this, but important is, and I was so pleased when Felipe did that, is he touched on the fact that the architect of this Witkerk was Carl Otto Hage. Now, there's an important snippet over there. Carl Otto Hage arrived in the country as a photographer. He was one of Cape Town's very first photographers. And he went in partnership with a fellow German photographer, Karl Sparman. And their relationship went up, belly up, very quickly. Carl Otto Hage withdrew and settled in Stellenbosch and then focused on architecture, an art or a skill that he developed in Germany. Why that is important is these two gentlemen, but I think especially the architect of this building over here, he would have taken the very first photographic formats known, namely the daguerreotype. I have never come across a daguerreotype taken in South Africa by a South African photographer. They are around, but we don't know how to identify them because the photographers, unlike in the later paper formats, did not apply their names. So, significant piece of history over there. The architect over here initially was a photographer and an important photographer in our country. On churches, this is the English church. This complex was completed in 1887 and underwent alterations in 1902. And me and Rex are still in dispute when we look at the two different buildings. Is it the same building, yes or no? But I quickly bounce it off Theo, and he's comfortable that I don't show the second building over here, but that it's exactly the same building that was altered at a later stage. In doing preparation yesterday afternoon, I stumbled across the following image. So somebody commented on this article that we published on Middelburg, and he then added this image, and it gives so much better context to the previous image. So it tells us it's on Middle Street. Over here, we just don't know exactly where it is. So this image gives us historical context. It's an image that was taken a little bit later, but of significance once again. I keep on reflecting on this street light over here. So this is probably an image from around mid-1920s. So that was probably also had to be lit every night, but there we see telephone or telegraph lines, etc. And we know that this is Middle Street running across here. I'm multi-skilling between these two electronic devices. Another beautiful photograph, early 1900s. And here we've got the Methodist Church. And in the background over there is another church. Theo confirmed with me this morning that this church building still exists. It still stands. That Hervormde Kerk sadly no longer stands. And this is the reason why these images are very important. And Theo is just holding up a much better image in terms of the Hervormde Kerk as we see in the background over here. So if you want to go and have a look at this church and up much closer, it's on the back table over there. There we go. Thank you, guys. Now, this is not a photograph, so I'm cheating. But I had to include Boccabello. And Boccabello has got a fascinating history as such, a sad history as well, because I believe it's gone to total wreck and ruin. I've never been there. I believe that they have attempted to set it up as a museum of some sort that no longer exists, etc. So this is a mission station a few kilometers outside of Middelburg. This is the earliest church built in the region over here. It was built in 1868. And in order to protect the building, this I picked up yesterday very quickly as well, a small settlement, a fort called Fort Wilhelm, was also built around it as such. And guys at the back, my Middelburg historians, you're welcome to add or comment on that. All right, let's break the monotony quickly. I thought let's throw in some snippets over here. So Middelburg, Eastern Cape, and Middelburg, Mpumalanga or Transvaal. Middelburg, Eastern Cape was established in 1852. Middelburg only in 1874. As many of you will know, probably from a presentation yesterday as well, it was called Nazareth for a few years. There's an interesting story, and I have to look at Prof. Frans Johan over here. I don't know whether he's heard about it or whether he can confirm. It's an urban legend of a young boy. During the Anglo-Boer War over here, there was some skirmishes taking place between the Brits and the Boers. At some stage, the urban legend has it that the Boers started to retreat. But the Brits were fascinated by shots still being fired by a single rifleman. And the shots kept on ringing, and they kept on ringing. And what the Brits did is they circled this lone marksman, this lone shooter, only to find out that it was a 14-year-old boy. Now, Prof. Frans Johan, I don't know whether you've heard this story before. I quite like this urban legend. The sad story is we have not been able to confirm who this 14-year-old was, therefore confirms that it's actually an urgent legend. So Theo, I'm breaking all the rules in terms of that one has to verify information, etc. This is unverified. It's just a lovely story that I picked up in a book somewhere that was written many, many years ago around Middelburg. I've included the aspect that I've never been there, that there's a blockhouse as well. Don't know whether Simon is in the room over here. I know he's doing a presentation tomorrow. Thank you, Simon. I have not come across a picture postcard. Now, I know that Simon also tries to collect picture postcards of all blockhouses in South Africa. It would be important for us to go and find a picture postcard. And Simon, if I can just check, have you ever seen a picture postcard of the blockhouse? It's called Kanonkop, just outside town. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah. There we go. Thank you. In 1903, there were 3,685 souls in town, but the author does state he doesn't know whether it includes the British soldiers. So if we start thinking of British soldiers, it probably would have been around 5,000 souls in town. Memorial Hall, which I see is on the program, which we'll visit later. Memorial Hall exists because of the 1,381 women and children that died in the concentration camp. Post the Anglo-Boer War, I found this a fascinating snippet. There were 5 hotels in town, and it was a thriving business until such time that the Brits withdrew in 1909, and there was an economic slump following that. Just additional snippet which I find fascinating is that Smuts's house in Irene was built from material following the vacation of the British cantonments over here. So that house was built from old building material in the military quarters from Middelburg. Back to pictures. Imperial Hotel on the corner of Market and Extian Street. And next to the hotel stands the town hall. which was built in 1902. So this is the town hall over here. And this must have been one of the hotels which the British frequented. And the additional note that I've got over here, the town hall stood across from Rood Square. Now, Theo, I just need to ask you over there, I'm correct in saying that a facade or part of the facade of the town hall still stands, is that correct? Thank you for that. Now, military cantonments, I'm just showing 2 images over here. There are more images, and I must share as well that these are the more difficult images to get hold of. They mainly come from Rex Helligan's collection as such. The British took Middelburg in July 1900. This is the General Officer Commanding Quarters, which was located in what's known as Clubville today, which is around more or less where we are, or where the golf course is today. The postcard was published, I may add, by local residents or local business called Raphael Tuck and Son. There's another image, Officers Club. So this is of significance for the Anglo-Boer War guys. Yeah, sure. Say again, the house that became? Okay. Wow, okay. Thank you for that. Wasn't aware of that. I thought it was just bits and pieces from all over the place. Okay, most valuable. Thank you, Theo. Military hospital. And there we go. Have you guys been to the bridge yet or not? Not? Okay, so the bridge still to be visited. I did that a while ago with Rex Helligan. We visited the bridge. Of significance over here, it's built over the Klein Olifants River. But look at those lamp poles over there. Once again, I'm fascinated by that. And it's, well, I think still relatively far out of town, but the bridge had lights. It was named in honor of Isaac Johannes Meyer, who represented Middelburg in the Second Volksraad. So I didn't tell you this. It's known as the Meyer Bridge, although the slide will tell us that. So it was named after Isaac Johannes Meyer. It was constructed by an Italian constructor called or named Celso Ghiri, and the bridge was completed in 1896. Today, sadly, no longer in use as a road bridge. I think it's just in use as a pedestrian bridge. I saw some people using it as a pedestrian bridge. Still the bridge, and I think this is a beautiful social image. So we see the left-hand side, and once again, we can see the lamp pole over there, and it wouldn't have been electricity. So it was once again paraffin-driven. And we see a Zionist christening taking place. This process entails dipping an individual underwater for 3 times. These events turned out to be an all-day event or a weekend outing. And I still see that every now and then. The Clarence guys, when I travel between Clarence and Verriesburg, I see the activity over there. There's similar activity taking place near water over there of some sort. Why is this image important? Because on one of the presentations earlier this morning, I'm just trying to think whose presentation that was. The comment was made that we've got very little history in terms of our South African black population. And this is just one image that captures part of that history, vitally important in my mind. And I may share with you, finding photographs of black South Africans is exceptionally difficult for various reasons. I'm not going to go into that right now. And I had a big debate, an argument, if you like, with an American professor around the availability of photographs of black South African sitters. Interesting picture. Market Street looking south. And then it tells me over here that the first double-story building over here is that of Crocker and Dix. And the building immediately to the right of that is the Molnar building. Interesting over here, and I don't have much information about this, but I did ask the question 2 years ago in terms of a water canal. So it's interesting that water was led from, I believe it's the Kruger Dam, is that right? Okay, Kruger Dam led into town. And this is one of the very few examples that we can see on a picture postcard around the water. This card confirms that it would be before 1909, because there you still see British soldiers standing on the corner there. Once again, Market Street. I used to work for a group called First Rand Bank, and there is the National Bank. The National Bank, as a matter of interest, was a predecessor to De Nasionale Bank, which started in Pretoria, ZAR, and we saw that in the presentation this morning as well in terms of the mint, etc. So that's an interesting piece of historical narrative. This is, in my language, it's my language, a more contemporary card, because here now we see a car. But also, sorry, I hear comments, but I can't hear it. And there we can see the Imperial Hotel, and there's a canal. I think that was a comment that was made in the background over there. This canal looks a little bit neater than the one that we saw before. And then, of course, I like the social aspect, people walking in the street with a kid on the tricycle. That's why this photograph is so special to me. So people were comfortable to walk on the street with children on tricycles. Now, this is an image, once again, on Market Street, but this one has got me baffled. So I'm speculating over here, and I haven't tested this with Theo or Rudy or any of those guys. It's once again shows the gents outfitters that I've pointed out earlier on, Crocker and Dix on the left, with the shop Molnar Importers in the center. Ownership of a unique red building on the right still needs to be determined. So I've not been able to figure out, and I haven't tried hard enough, because I haven't spoken to Theo already about this, who the owner of this building was. And then the big question was as well, was this building red? Was the brickwork red, or whatever color you would define that is? And my recommendation is no, it was not red. What I haven't shared with you, all the picture postcards that you've seen thus far are hand-colored. They're not originally in color. They had to be hand-colored before they were printed in mass. So although it's a nice postcard, it talks to me in terms of the additional color, I doubt whether that building was ever in red brick. The school building was built in 1904, and during the Anglo-Boer War was used as a school for children in concentration camps, etc. And I must say I struggle a little bit with the schooling aspect still in Middelburg. It's a major learning experience. It's referred to as a free school. And in the background again, you see the Witkerk. There we go. Potentially emotional picture. The Middelburg Excelda School, which later became an orphanage, stood on the corner of Paul Kruger and Coetzee Street. The architect was Zarnica, and the builder was R. Gerard. The cornerstone of this building was laid in 1894. The complex functioned as an orphanage only for 4 years. And later, the complex was used for church services by the Wesleyan Church. There's a beautiful view from a distance of early town. I would guess this photograph is probably 1903. Probably 1903, it won't be older. This is just a combination card. They love, my apologies, wrong button. They love producing combination cards, which people then send abroad. And by the way, picture postcards then is typically what we know as WhatsApps today. People had to communicate, so I just let my wife know I'll arrive at the station on Friday this coming week. I'll post it, and she'll get it in time to get a horse carriage to come and pick me up at the station, for example. And it's fascinating reading the messages on some of these cards as well, which helps us to construct social history. I'm pausing intentionally. This was an observation made by a local businessman, J.H. Henwood. He was a shop owner over here. He arrived in Middelburg from London. And he says the following about the people. I think it's beautiful. It tells us something about town. It tells us something about the culture at the time. He says, of the people who live here in the early days, I can only speak of them with the greatest respect and admiration. In fact, the genuine hospitality and friendship I have received from Afrikaner can never be forgotten. And that's just a beautiful, sentimental message, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, that is my visual presentation. This is an extract of a much bigger collection. If I had to show you all the postcards over here, we would have been here for another hour. There we go.